Hi there, this is your host Marco Adda, and welcome to In the Mouth of the Wolf podcast, a place where we explore at the age of humanity, animality, and the living world. This is a place where different disciplines meet, where researchers and practitioners come together to help us understand how humans, animals, and the planet coexist. Join us as we explore life across species and beyond. So step with me into the wolf's mouth, not a place of fear, but a place of curiosity and wonder. And now let's listen our intro and then move on with our guest. In this episode, I'm going to have a conversation with Malena Mogwitz. Originally from Germany, Malena has been living in various countries, which allowed her to gather practical experience in field work with wildlife, as well as various cultural perspectives on sustainability and what we call nature. Feeling a close connection to natural landscapes, animals, and plants, her studies in ecology and environmental philosophy allowed her to dive deeper into the exploration of human-nature relationships. Over the past years, she has been participating in whale research after following an inner calling to encounter those animals. Malena holds a multidisciplinary perspective and is seeking to challenge current anthropocentric lenses in research and conservation approaches. Through her academic work, her artwork, and her personal life, she is trying to build bridges between different kinds of knowledge as well as between human and other species. And you can imagine how excited I am to have Malena as a guest. Please raise your attention and enjoy. Here we go. Malena, you were showing me this beautiful journal of yours
Yeah.
with whales on top of it. What is that?
Well, that's a journal that I saw in a store the same year that I met and encountered the whales for the first time. And it just felt like a sign, you know? I knew that I needed to meet the whales. I wasn't sure what to expect, if I would even like it, but I knew like, okay, I want to do an internship with whales. Somehow it just came up. And then I walked into this store and looking at the notebooks, I pulled, I think this was even the first journal that I pulled out of the shelf. And I was like, wow, I need it. And it felt a little bit like a vision board of like keeping my eye on the whales and knowing, okay, I have no clue if it's gonna work out, where I'm gonna be with whales, and how I'm gonna feel about it. But um, that's kind of how the journey started a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And by the way, welcome on the podcast In the Mouth of the Wolf podcast. Thank you for being
Thank
here with
you.
us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, we are, and I am, and we are really eager to hear about whales, whatever, where to start. It's such a fascinating topic. We have been discussing already a bit about it, and maybe we can start from your from that journal, or maybe from some of your experiences, because through your experiences we can certainly capture some relevant aspects relating to whales, right? Places you've been and encounters you had. Where do we start? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe let's start from the beginning. So,
Oh, why not? Yeah. Actually,
that,
but if we really start from the beginning, I start with a question actually.
go ahead.
When, if you don't mind, when and how you felt that whales were calling for you?
So yeah, it was 2 to 3 years ago, after just having spent some time for my studies in Norway. I was not by the sea, but I knew that I wanted to do an internship for myself and originally also for my studies. And then I don't know, it just came up, the whales, and I didn't know anything about them at that time. Like I couldn't have told you the difference between a humpback whale and a fin whale
Mm,
or whatever. It was just, yeah, this feeling of I need to go and meet them. Yeah.
mm. And then you went.
And then I went,
And where did
and
you go?
yeah.
Tell us all of your
So
journeys.
yeah, so the first time that I really got in touch with whales was in the same year. I spent quite some time at the Canadian West Coast,
Hmm.
um, on First Nation territory, in a very, very, I'd say, privileged space in the sense of getting very close to the animals, yeah, I don't even know how to put it into words, but a very important place for the whales and for the people,
Mm.
and in a different setting than probably most of us might experience whales, like, for example, in whale watching. And yeah, it fell into place quite magically. I had another internship opportunity, and then really, which wasn't with whales, it was with the ocean as well. And I felt like, no, it's about whales. So an opportunity arose, very interesting timing, and felt quite uncomfortable, but I jumped. And yeah, not knowing what to expect, definitely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, and so you had the first and important opportunity to witness whales and to see whales from far and from close, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that was a lot thanks to the context that
Hmm.
I spent time in. A very calm area where you don't have too much of a human impact, more and more as well. But yeah, and quite an important area for different whale species, in summer at least, to spend their time there, to rest, take a nap, feed. They come with their kids, migrating up from the tropics. Yeah, and also the living conditions for us humans. It was a very remote place, as I mentioned, on First Nation territory. So quite in I'd say, specific cultural context as well.
Hmm.
With, yeah, quite, I guess, to some point, different values that I
Yeah.
attributed to animals and whales and the ecosystem than in lots of industrialized nations. And yeah, the living conditions of basically just being a part of the forest and hearing whales breathing in the bay while I was falling asleep, for example. So yeah, it was less of a watching and more of a um, coexisting, I guess, being
Hmm.
neighbors in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and you say they were coming there with their kids, so there were family groups. There was a mom, a dad, kids, a nanny, an uncle, what a granny. What was the family group composed of?
Yeah, so it depends on the species, but right now I
Hmm.
was thinking about humpback whales.
Hmm.
They're species who migrate thousands of kilometers, at
Hmm.
least every few years, between their breeding grounds, which are in warmer tropical waters, and then their feeding grounds further up north. And for humpback whales, you don't have the father who stays around, but you have
Mm.
the mom who, yeah, in the first year, I mean, when they're still quite young, they give birth to the babies, yeah, in the tropical waters, and then migrate back up to fill their bellies, and the calves, yeah, go along with them. So that's what I was allowed to see, seeing calves, yeah, from probably the same year, or yeah, only at least not super old, because then they split up. And humpback whales, for example, are also spending quite some time alone, or at least in groups which can change over time. Um, But then you also have other species like orcas, for example, which are very well known, identified, and researched. Yeah, at the eastern Pacific coast.
Hmm.
Let's put it like this. So west coast of the United States and Canada, and they of course live in very very close familiar relations, very complex social structures. And there I was also allowed to see babies. So yeah, basically you can apply to different species. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so you spend some time there. It seems um, quite a blessing to hear that you were maybe falling asleep and all of a sudden hearing some whales around moving and vocalizing. Also, they vocalize, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
You can hear that from outside of the water, right? You don't need to be underwater to hear that, isn't it?
You don't need to be underwater, but I guess it helps for most cases to have a
Mm,
hydrophone, so a
mm,
microphone underwater. And in that particular place, yeah, we were listening to it like all the time. And then you can, yeah, sometimes you don't even know there's a whale. Whales are always good for surprises, and you can be sure that they mess up your planning of the day, your schedule
mm.
or whatever. They just surprise you, and sometimes you only realize that they're, or you hear them vocalizing first. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and then from Canada, you moved somewhere else at some point, right?
Yeah, so regarding the whales, I at
Regarding the
first I
whale.
was, yeah, regarding the whales, they kind of kept me company from distance, it feels like. Like I fell in love from the moment, yeah, that I was allowed to coexist with them, in a quiet, yeah, remote and natural place. And then I tried to implement them in my studies, which, like, at the base are not at all marine related, but I tried to involve them. And then I had the opportunity to go to Iceland within my studies. And yeah, I think again, quite some magical moments and surprising opportunities arising that I had not planned before. But again, returning to the whales kind of through my studies in the end, my master thesis, getting involved in, yeah, research with whales, and continuing to study basically the relationships between the human species and different whale species.
Yes, and so what was the scenario there in Finland, sorry, in Iceland? Yeah, and what were you observing? Were you observing them from land, from a boat, or they were coming around? What you've seen, what you've noticed?
Yeah, it was quite different from place to place. Like the
Mm,
first evening that I arrived in Iceland, I coincidentally or magically, however you want to call it, ended up in a place where there was a group of humpback whales hanging out, where it's like an area where they're usually not observed so much. But
mhm,
these few individuals stayed there for quite some days. Just I think there was a lot of fish, eating a lot, and coming very, very close to land. Like, and also seeing the reactions from other tourists who came there to see puffins, but in the end, there were the whales and the puffins. Was really touching to see, like how it, yeah, how it fascinates people and kind of humbles them, like realizing the actual size, for example, of a humpback whale, which can be
mhm.
anything between 12 meters and more. So yeah, it was definitely from land, very, very close. I think one of the most beautiful encounters I had so far. But then I also joined in different places, some whale watching tours, and ended up in, yeah, collaborating with a research center and observing, yeah, observing the what happens when you link an economy and tourism to the whales,
Mm,
its challenges and its advantages. And yeah, it definitely felt a bit like a different approach in Iceland than in Canada, but of course that's very place, not space as well, but place specific,
mhm.
and depending on the operators and what the mentality is.
Yeah,
Like in
when people
Canada, yeah.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Like in Canada, it was everything was focused around the whale's well-being. It was more like, okay, we're observing, but we're not supposed to interfere or interrupt. So we had a lot of observations going on from land, and when it was on the boat, it was very respectful, keeping a distance. Yeah, basically leaving a choice to the whales. Whereas, of course, you can imagine on a whale watching boat where the owners have to live from this activity, you can see quite some different approaches to whales. And it felt a little bit more like consuming. There was a consuming
Hmm.
aspect to it. Yeah, quite complex.
Yeah, the similar issue that we have in other wild animals watching and bird watching and so forth, right? But when people goes there and want to average people in general wants to see whale, what do you think? Why what you experience, what you witnessed, what they want to feel, what makes them excited, why they want to see whales?
Well, I guess it's animals that you don't necessarily can meet in front of your door at
Hmm.
home.
So the
It's wild.
surprise of meeting an animal that you would never meet otherwise.
Maybe, yeah. I think
Ah,
there's
one of the
probably something.
elements. Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably there is something to it, like people kind of chasing, quote unquote, rare species or species that they don't necessarily have at home. I think for some people, it's also just part of their planned tour or holidays, like hearing
Mm,
about it and just going for it. But what is really interesting is, yeah, seeing lots of different humans' reactions to finally encountering them and how
mhm,
they, yeah, really touch a lot of people with their presence. I mean, yeah, probably difficult to imagine if you've never experienced it, but feeling and hearing like the power of a whale's breath that is very close by
mm.
um, it has something very, very powerful, very humbling, I guess, realizing like, wow, huge animals. And yeah.
Well, maybe in some cases, people may approach whale watching with more touristic perspective or fascination, with some fascination, and they may end up to feel that actually they've been touched at a different level, like almost like going to visiting a temple to see the architecture, and then you end up to become a monk because you are touched by the experience on a different level, right? Have you experienced also that? Have you witnessed that in to some extent?
Yeah, I'd say yes for both. So, like personally, I've experienced it lots of times, and I think that's probably what drew me into wanting to stay connected with
Hmm.
them. It's like, I feel like, again, it's very generalized, of course, but every species has their own energy to them, their own
Hmm.
character. And then again, of course, you have individuals who are still like
Hmm.
individuals. But I feel like for let's stay with humpback whales, for example, I feel like yeah, calling them gentle giants in the impression that they can have on humans. It's not necessarily always, true for their whole life, and most of it we don't see as humans. Like, it doesn't mean that there's not competition or whatever in their
Hmm.
social structures. But yeah, the impact they have on humans, like the impression that I had a lot of times is like a very powerful but calm energy. Like, of course, you can sometimes even be scared, like when you don't expect a whale to show up and then you just hear the breath from very close. First, you're like,
Hmm.
wow, what was that?
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, basically, it was a lot of times just really touching me in my heart and bringing me back into my body, being someone quite a lot in the mind, like probably a lot of us nowadays, additionally. I had different moments where just being in their presence really allowed me to come back into my body. And it was not, something like, oh, I see a whale, I have to be present. But it was just like, yeah, mesmerizing, humbling, and just kind of connecting me to what is essential. And yeah, remembering who else is out there, or not even out there, because out there is our separated way of seeing it, but yeah, who else we share the world with. So very emotional and very touching. And I have the feeling that for me personally, this is like the more intense, the more I'm present. So, for example, when I'm busy with collecting data, looking at it from a scientific angle, it can be less strong. Or, for example, taking pictures. And I know this feeling for myself of being torn between, wanting to document it for later because it's just, yeah, an incredible experience. But then also, yeah, being scared of missing out the moment and their presence. Yeah. And then for other people, it's really interesting because, again, you can put so many words to it, and some people might talk about something spiritual they experienced. But whatever you want to put to it, just, yeah, seeing how people react, how impressed they are, how touched, quite regardless, their backgrounds, their cultures even, I guess, cultural backgrounds. It's really fascinating to see what a whale can do
Yeah,
to a
absolutely.
lot
And
of us. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, that brings leads to the point of resonance, of resonating with certain species, right? And whales resonating, meaning for those who are listening, emotionally and physically and somatically, being in the presence of a species and feeling to some extent that resonates, that moves you to some level, in some way, right? You feel like a symbiosis in some cases with certain species, right? And whales are very powerful, also archetypically speaking, right? As an archetypical animal, they appears in dream. They are part of stories or fairy tales in certain cultures. They, for example, in um, for population of New Zealand, if I recall it right, there are stories that tell of whales leading uh, humans moving through the oceans up to New Zealand, for example, right?
Mm.
So that would be a cooperative navigation of whales and humans, for example, right? Well, we don't
Yeah.
have proof of that, but there are many aspects related to resonance with other species, which are also of our shared interest, Malina, and whales are powerful in that regard, right? And that links to the discussion about intuition, that is an important part of connecting with animals, right? Apart from studying them, also more from an academic perspective, but intuition is also core. And I would like to share a few moments about that, a few words
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, I know that you are also open to that perspective. Actually, you said already a few things that link to intuition, right? So,
Yeah, and I think the kind of challenge or the art is to link them both, right? Like
mm,
having the scientific perspective, which is quite rational. Talking about natural sciences for
yeah.
now, which we need to gain knowledge and to, for example, understand better our impacts we have on them. But then, yeah, just having the scientific perspective, it feels like something is missing, and it can also be quite distancing. And I'm just recalling an experience with whales, where same they appeared quite unexpectedly, and I could really observe. I was a lot of in my head. I heard them breathing. I was like, wow, that can't be true. What is happening? And then because it was winter, and normally they're not supposed
Mm,
to be in this place. And then they just really brought me back into my body, feeling grounded. And then I could see how my scientific mind, was going
mm,
off and taking off and like, oh my God, what is this species? What are they doing? What is their behavior and everything? And then I just had this thought of, you know what, right now, maybe that's not what is most important. Maybe it's just to be present with them.
mm,
And yeah, yeah. So I think it's important to have both and to combine both. And even though science, of course, needs to in quite some areas, scientific methods need to stay objective and kind of distanced. I think there's also huge risk to it because we are relational beings. We live and get formed and evolve through relations. And I think just reducing them to human relations we have between human individuals, is not enough. We
Yeah.
can, yeah, we can experience so much more and learn so much more from other species as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, that paradigm of being so distant and objective maybe is coming to a negotiation, at least to say, with other perspectives. Maybe it has dominated for a while, but maybe it's time also to integrate things and to merge different views into,
Definitely.
yeah. And you were mentioning at some point in our one of our previous conversations of somebody, a scientist maybe, telling something. You read me something,
Yeah, I
yeah.
can read it
What
again.
was that? That was interesting. What was that?
Yeah, maybe just to give a context,
Ah.
what I'm quite interested in as well, talking about the distance and everything, is that just because you're a scientist, of course, you're also somehow emotionally involved. Like,
Yeah.
even though you try not to stay objective and neutral and everything. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that the original motivation to, for example, research with whales or want to protect nature comes from emotional experiences and, yeah, intuition, things that call us, that somehow like intrigue us. And I think what is really interesting, and there are several cases out there and probably a lot more that haven't been documented, is when you have researchers who experience who have a whale encounter that they scientifically can't really explain, or that seems too, like humanizing them too much, or that seems very risky to state it from a scientific point of view, to the point that they are scared to lose their credibility in their work and as scientists. And yet, that are documented, and it's hard to just say, well, this didn't exist. So I think oftentimes there might arise conflicts between what we experience while we're out with the whales, and then what we are allowed, quote unquote, to formulate, in the scientific language. And yeah, the quote that I read you earlier, it's from Alexander Morton, who's a scientist,
Hmm.
who has contributed a lot, very significant work to the orca populations in on the West Coast, American West Coast. Um, and yeah, she was she wrote a very nice book. I don't remember the title. I think it's called Listening to Whales. Yeah, that's it.
Beautiful.
Describing, well, basically blending what we're just talking about as well, blending storytelling of her life and then how that was intertwined and entangled with the orcas and later with the salmon and human impacts on the ecosystems there. And basically, yeah, she mentioned a few experiences where, as a scientist, she couldn't really talk about it so much or explain it, but it seemed, too, yeah, how should it seemed really to be too much of a coincidence. Very difficult to phrase it. And basically, what she said was that the inability to explain is no reason to forget, modify, or deny the extraordinary information that sometimes comes through our ordinary senses, and that the unbelievable is sacred knowledge that must be kept. Yeah, that's what she's saying that's what she's saying in her book, Listening to Whales, what the orcas have taught us. And I think that's something really, really beautiful to keep in mind, in the sense of being open-minded enough, whether you're a researcher or watching whales or whatever, to at least, be open to the possibility that there is more that we can't explain, but just because we can't explain it, it doesn't mean that it's not true. And I think this is also what really helps science to progress and evolve, and our knowledge as it has been. I mean, we know that evolution is ongoing, whether it's regarding species or our knowledge, it's always evolving. And to kind of keep this open-mindedness while sticking, of course, to some rules of the scientific community, but then also having the courage to challenge those that might be old and not fitting anymore for our times. I think that's yeah, something very important.
Absolutely, tremendously important. And what you said, I took a note. The unbelievable is the secret knowledge that should be kept. I
Yeah.
can't agree more on this. And also, I want to send a message to all the scientists listening, just in case you are passing by and listening. Just please um, keep your intuition open, keep your door open to the unbelievable. Maybe it doesn't have to be explained, but not because of that. You should not allow yourself to experience it. Yeah, I can't say
Yeah,
it
definitely.
otherwise. Yeah, wonderful to end our conversation on this. But tell me, do you have any final remarks on whales? Any final uh, uh, gift that you want to give to us about whales?
Yeah, let me think about it. Well, I think what comes to mind again for me as well is like always this dilemma, right, of wanting to encounter them in real life, but then also the human impacts we have on them.
Yeah,
And I know, for example, that it's an incredible privilege that I had in the past until now to encounter them like from so close. I have experienced moments where I felt very sorry for them as well because I felt like the approaches were not completely respectful. So yeah, I think it's always a dilemma between creating a personal relationship or experience with the species, like for example the whales, because I think what moves us also motivates us to, stand up for them, for example. And then at the same time, yeah, I mean, most of us don't live close to whales. And then how do you get people out there? I think it's important and at the same time a challenge. And just what I maybe can say from my experiences is that I feel like the most precious moments that I had with whales were the ones where I saw them from close, but it was their choice. And it was not chasing after them, for example. Definitely. And I think, yeah, you can probably have it with a lot of species. For me personally, at the moment, it's whales. Just allowing yourself to be in their presence when they show up, when you get the opportunity to see them from far or close, and just being open to see what arises and what it triggers in you as feelings and emotions. I think that's really, really precious. And I think that can open doors of yeah, feeling reconnected actually and realizing, wow, we're sharing this world with so many others who live so different types of lives, and it's just
yeah,
incredible, Like imagine just how whales live. They're mammals that moved well, what we know that
yeah,
moved like back from land into the sea, and then they evolved in a way that they have their kind of, what we have as a nose on top of their heads, so that they don't have to each time when they come up to breathe consciously because they have to remember to breathe. It's nothing automatic, and they can drown also, by the way. Yeah, so that they don't have to stick out their whole head to take a breath, when they come to the surface. And just yeah, this keeping this open-mindedness and curiosity, and yeah, I think that's a really good step to encounter other beings and also respect them then.
yeah. Respect for them, respect for nature, and respect for every other species. Nature,
Yeah,
every species has uh, behaviors, personality, ecosystem they live in. We need to be very careful in that regard, right? And it applies to wild animals. It applies also to our companion animals. Sometimes
definitely. And the
let's wait
species,
for them to come and say hello instead than chasing them around
definitely.
the apartment. And
Definitely. I guess you could even sometimes apply it to humans.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Being better listeners in that regard, with ourselves and also with all we have around, humans or other species, right? Malena, was
Yes.
wonderful to have you here. Thank you. I'm very grateful for this conversation. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
I will put your contact details attached to this episode, and it was a pleasure. And hopefully, this is the beginning of various conversations about whales, animals, humans, life, and all. Thank you again. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you from your host Marco Adda. Please support this program by reviewing the podcast, by reviewing this episode, by writing a comment, by subscribing to the podcast, whatever platform you're using to listen. And if you have any ideas or other comments, write to my personal email, marcogerardoadda@gmail.com. And if you wish to sponsor one or more episode, you can become a supporter, a sponsor, or a co-author of the podcast, meaning that you can suggest and we can work together on a specific aspect you would like for more awareness to be generated, or a story you want to hear on this program. We want for this podcast to be the voice of the community, that's for sure. Remember, metaphorically speaking, the mouth of the wolf is the safest place you may happen to be. Stay tuned, be foolish and alive. Stay wolfy.